I just want to say that it was, I thought, a good idea for us to sing something uplifting at that very moment. It's Christmas, and here we are. There's so many traditions around Christmas, and you know, this is one time of year when those traditions become so important. When those things that have been done year after year take on a little more significance. You know, you can mess with a lot of things, but you can't mess too much with Christmas. Because those stories and those lessons and those feelings that we come back to, you know, they help us. And I don't know, there's a test that I've been given on how to measure the level of stress in your life. And you look back over the last year, and if you did if something happened to you, then you add a certain number of points. And you know, gaining a new job with new responsibility is a few. Losing your job is a whole lot. And as you go down the list, not closer to the bottom than the top, but not at the very bottom, is if you celebrate Christmas. Count on some added stress in your life that year. It can get hard to try to do all the things that we feel like we're supposed to do, to try to keep up with all the things we're supposed to keep up with. It's easy to get all stressed out, confused, overworked, and it's at those moments that helps to get back, not to the traditions alone, but to the story that the traditions are meant to tell. You know, Kate talked about that little illustration of a Christmas tradition whose meaning had gotten washed away over the years. And part of our job as people who come to celebrate Christmas is to make sure not just that we pass on those traditions, but that we make sure that the meaning behind them isn't washed away by all the busyness of the world. And you know, if you look at that, think about the shows where they talk about the true meaning of Christmas. Rudolph. Do you know where Rudolph came from? Yeah, Rudolph was invented by Montgomery Wards, so they could sell Rudolph stuffed animals, which would help you to learn the true meaning of Christmas. It's interesting that Montgomery Wards is gone and Rudolph is still going, so maybe that says something. Even the Grinch, which is one of my favorites, Dr. Seuss and the Grinch Who Stole Christmas, at the end, what's the true meaning of Christmas? That they're all together singing in some foreign language, nonsense words, around the tree and the presents, and the Grinch learns his lesson. But even that isn't the true meaning of Christmas. We're not just here to be with our families. We're not just here to feel a little better. We're not just here to take care of each other. We're here because Jesus is born, which doesn't show up in Dr. Seuss or Rudolph or most of the other ones. People ask me why Charlie Brown is my favorite. That's why. At the end of it, they tell you that's the meaning of Christmas. That Jesus is born. That God has cut through and knocked down every barrier, every possible thing that can stand in the way. And a little baby boy has come into the world. Not as this wise man that we picture, but as this helpless little child who needs to be taken care of and looked over and watched over and diaper changed and everything else. That's where God is in our world. That's an important lesson. We remember what God had the angels say that day, peace on earth and goodwill. And you know, it's strange because when we think about how we find peace, anyone who's had a little baby knows that infants and peace do not necessarily connect together, obviously, in our minds or in our experiences. But what God God was telling us was that through Jesus, who came into our lives and lived just like we did, from that very helpless beginning to all the trials that everyone else goes through, even to a painful death, that Jesus went through it all. And God was going through it. That God went through all the experiences that we have as people. And that we are never, ever alone. We are never, ever separated from God. We can be far away from our families. We can be cut off from our communities. We can be full of all those feelings that you're not supposed to feel at Christmas time. But God is still there with us every moment. That's why the angel said, peace on earth. You know, I'm going to tell you a story too. About 4 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, we had bought a new car. And we're driving it on the expressway. Very first time. I'll tell you, Kate was driving, but it wasn't her fault. The policeman, the guy who ran her off the highway said so. The guy who ran her off the highway so that as we were in our new car, it was forced in the median and then started to roll. Kind of like that little silver car we have now in the Littler. Rolled over the median. Rolled down. I remember thinking, we're going to be okay. We're rolling. We'll come to a stop. But we're going to be all right. The car will stop. We'll be fine. And then I realized that the car was rolling up. And I somehow could see that we were rolling onto the other lane of traffic on Labor Day weekend in the middle of the country, so nobody's stopping. And I even remember thinking, you know, they say that time passes slowly when you're in a situation like this. So I'm pretty sure those cars don't have time to stop, even though it feels like I've been here for a whole minute. Oh, we're going to get hit, and we're all going to die. Bummer. And then the car stopped and rolled back down. And when we got out and looked, the track of our car went right up onto the shoulder, the blacktop, and then came back down again. One more roll. And in that moment, there was peace. Not simply because I knew I was going to go to heaven. That's important, don't get me wrong. That assurance and that knowledge that God is with you. That's important. But what's really mattered was almost what happened the next day. You ever hear someone say, I had a brush with death, and I looked at my life, and I realized, oh, how have I been living this way? You know? What got me was that I was able to look back at my life, and as imperfect and as flawed and as many bad things as I have done and continue to do, with all that, I was able to look back and say, I followed Jesus. I've done what I can do. Haven't gotten it right all the time. Have gotten it wrong an awful lot of the time. But I've been going with Him. And I've been making sure that my life and the things I do matter. And that the time I spend matters. And if the time I have is only so long, I did my best, which wasn't always very good, to make each day count. That's what the angels were talking about when they said peace on earth. They weren't saying God's going to come along and make everything okay. They weren't saying you're going to snap your fingers and all the things you've been waiting for are going to get dropped in your lap. They weren't saying you can plant a seed and have it rewarded tenfold. What they were saying was, through Jesus, there is peace that nothing can take away. Not death, not separation, not the challenges of life, and not even those little day-to-day things that drag you down. It's easy it's easy sometimes when something big gets in your face to stand up to it. It's those little day-to-day nags that really wear you down sometimes. Not even those can keep you from the peace that God has given us through Jesus. And so today, on Christmas Eve, as we gather in this building for the 105th time to celebrate Christmas Eve, as we do these things that mean so much, that remind us of all the people we've known and all those people we have yet to know, don't lose the meaning of what we are here to do. We are here to celebrate the peace that passes all understanding. The peace that Jesus came into the world to give us almost 2,000 years ago, and which is just as much there for each and every one of us as it was for those first shepherds. So on this Christmas Eve, I wish you peace. Amen.